Macmillan Audio presents Getting the Love You Want, a guide for couples by Harville Hendrix, Ph.D., 20th Anniversary Edition, with a new foreword by Harville Hendrix and Helen LaKelly Hunt. Read for you by Jack Garrett. Foreword to the 20th Anniversary Edition of Getting the Love You Want, with Helen LaKelly Hunt, Ph.D. The world is not comprehensible, but it is embraceable through the embracing of one of its beings. Martin Buber. I began an intense exploration of love relationships in 1975 in response to a question from a student in a marriage and family therapy class that I then taught. I remember the day clearly. It was a Tuesday morning, and I was 20 minutes late. I had just come from the county courthouse where I had been granted a divorce. I was hoping the students would have wandered off by the time I arrived, but when I opened the door, I saw that they were all there. I had no choice but to stand in front of them, a living testimony to all that I did not know about marriage. As it turned out, the students knew where I had been, and they greeted me with a surprising amount of compassion. I learned they had spent the last 20 minutes talking about their own relationships, something they had never done before in class. 3 of them had already married and divorced. 3 had never had a serious love relationship, and the remaining 6 were in troubled relationships. At the end of the class, a recently divorced student asked me this question: Dr. Hendrix, why do couples have such a hard time staying together? I thought for a moment and then responded, I don't have the foggiest notion. That is a great question, and I think I'll spend the rest of my career trying to find out. 2 years later, I met Helen, and we began a conversation about this question that has lasted to this day. After 30 years of being immersed together in the study of relationship dynamics, we have learned a great deal. Many of our insights can be found in this 20th Anniversary Edition of Getting the Love You Want. These pages summarize what we have gleaned from our collaboration, intensive reading, work with thousands of couples in private practice and workshops, and conversation with other psychologists and imago therapists. Although this edition brings some very significant additions to the book, which I will discuss later in this essay, much of the basic text is the same as the 2001 revised edition. On the whole, our ongoing research has supported rather than challenged the book's main premises. We have also amassed plentiful evidence that the book works in the real world. To date, several millions of couples worldwide have read Getting the Love You Want, and thousands of them have taken the time to share their experiences with Helen and me. Recently, a couple told us that they had been edging toward divorce, but decided to give their marriage one last chance. They rented a remote beach cabin, took along enough food and supplies for 7 days, and packed a copy of Getting the Love You Want. They vowed to read the entire book to each other and practice all the exercises. By the end of the week, they felt closer to each other than they had in 10 years. Ultimately, they decided to stay together and create a conscious partnership. 5 years later, they continued to enjoy a mutually satisfying relationship. They said, "Your book was exactly what we needed. It saved our marriage and, literally, our lives." What we changed. While much of the 2001 text remains, we have made some important revisions. The first revision was to use more inclusive language. Momentous changes in women's rights and same-sex relationships have taken place in the last 20 years. Just as it now seems inappropriate to use the pronoun he to describe both men and women, it is outdated to describe all committed love relationships as marriages, and the 2 individuals involved as spouses or husbands and wives. The last comprehensive census revealed that the United States has at least 5.5 million households headed by unmarried couples, a 72% increase from 1990. An estimated 1 in 8 of today's unmarried couples is a same-sex partnership. To reflect these societal changes, we now use the generic terms partners and couples. Second, we've made Helen's seminal role in developing imago relationship therapy more apparent. The original book reads like a one-man odyssey. In truth, Helen and I have been on a two-person mission to understand love relationships since our first date. In fact, we forged many of the key ideas in imago relationship therapy in the crucible of our own marriage. Without Helen, there would be no book. Third, the most substantive revision is replacing the original Chapter 11 with an entirely new chapter. This chapter used to be titled Containing Rage, and it was designed to help couples express the anger and frustration they had carried over from childhood. The chapter described an exercise called the full container that guided each partner in venting his or her anger while helping the other contain their reaction and listen with compassion. At the time, we believed that this catharsis would reduce the amount of tension in their day-to-day interactions. The opposite proved to be true. We discovered that the more couples practiced the exercise, the angrier they became toward their partner and in their daily lives. The entirely new Chapter 11, now titled Creating a Sacred Space, presents our new and highly effective strategies for diffusing childhood anger left over from childhood. Anger that can undermine an otherwise successful relationship. But the intent of this chapter goes far beyond helping couples reduce angry outbursts. It describes a process that helps couples eliminate all forms of negativity from their interactions. Everything from physical abuse and loud yelling to snide remarks, and thereby cuts anger off at its roots. As I explain at length in the chapter, we now believe that eliminating negativity is the most powerful way to transform a love relationship. Indeed, it is the foundation for lasting love. Finally, we made numerous smaller additions and deletions throughout the book. In places where we had not described a concept in enough depth, we added more information. When we discovered an idea that had become inconsistent with current IRT theory, we made the appropriate changes. We added 4 new exercises, making the book an even more useful tool for self-help. All in all, we believe that the readers of this 20th anniversary edition will be highly successful at getting the love they want, and that even readers of the earlier editions will find much beneficial new material. Connection. As we thought about writing this forward, we realized that we want to do more than simply explain the changes we made to the book. We decided to use this opportunity to talk about some of our overall conclusions about love relationships, conclusions that underlie every word of the text. Helen and I have reached the stage in our lives and our work with couples when a summing up seems appropriate. At the end of his career, Freud asked the now famous question, what do women want? We too have been struggling to answer a question. What do men and women want from their love relationships? We now believe that the answer to Freud's question and our question, indeed all of humanity's yearning, is one and the same. Above all else, we seek connection with parts of ourselves that we have repressed, with other people, and with the larger universe. We cannot experience life in its fullness unless we have an intimate relationship with another human being, and beyond that, a feeling of connection with the world around us. Using the language of Martin Buber, each person needs a thou to become a fully realized I. Looking back, we now see that our life's work has been rooted in helping couples create the hyphen in Buber's I-thou relationship. In this celebrated notation, the hyphen serves as both a link and a space holder. It signifies that the most fulfilling love relationship is one in which two people are intimately connected with each other, yet keep a respectful distance by acknowledging each other's otherness. The nature of this relationship cannot be described by the term I and thou, or by the collapsed I-thou. It is an I-thou relationship. The two individuals are separate and connected at the same time. The operative term here is connection. To us, it is more than a psychological term that describes human experience. From our extensive reading in other disciplines, we have come to believe that the word connection describes the universe. Since we as humans are an integral part of the universe, it also describes us. As all things are interconnected, so are we. It is our nature to be connected. If we do not feel connected, it is because something has happened to us to rupture our awareness of the connection. We may sometimes lose our awareness that we are a part of the whole, but that separateness is just an illusion. We cannot not be connected. Ruptured connection. The illusion of separateness is what brings most couples into therapy. They don't feel connected to each other, nor do they experience a seamless connection with the world around them or with the universe. They feel disjointed, isolated, and lonely. Their relationship might be characterized as me versus you. Our experience has taught us that the primary reason couples fail at creating an I-thou relationship is that they did not experience it in childhood. Unfortunately, most people experience their first relationship difficulty in the first 18 months of life. Experts in child development call this critical period the attachment stage. Having a close bond with one or more caregivers is important throughout childhood, but it is essential in those earliest months. In order to experience a strong and safe connection with a caregiver, children need what child psychologists call an attuned parent. This is a caregiver who is present in both meanings of the word, available to you physically, and with warm emotions most of the time. Ideally, this caregiver respects your individuality and turns to you for clues as to what you need in the moment. You are held when you need comfort and physical connection. You are fed when you are hungry. You are soothed when you are irritable, afraid, or in pain. You are put to bed when you are tired. This attuned parent also encourages you to express your full range of emotions, joy and playfulness, frustration and anger, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Rather than deflecting your feelings, your caregiver accepts them and mirrors them. Happy baby, you are such a happy baby. You look mad. Are you angry that you have to stop playing? All of this is done in a spirit of acceptance, love, and generosity. When you have an attuned parent, you are not a burden to your parent, nor are you the solution to your parent's own unmet needs. You are free to be you, and to be emotionally and physically close to a caring person at the same time. Children raised by attuned parents are more likely to create satisfying love relationships in adulthood. Because they had safe, nurturing bonds with their caregivers, they do not have an exaggerated fear of abandonment or engulfment. They are not likely to choose a partner out of sheer neediness because most of their primary needs were satisfied in childhood. They are not attracted to people who neglect, criticize, or abuse them. Being mistreated feels totally foreign, out of place, and intrinsically wrong. Further, they tend to attract the appropriate mate with relative ease. A person who is emotionally expressive, has a positive self-image, feels relatively secure, and who welcomes intimacy is highly attractive to others. desperately seeking connection. Regrettably, many of us had unattuned parents, and we bring the resulting unmet needs into our adult relationships. Not only did we experience disconnection from our parents, we began to feel disconnected from parts of ourselves. This inner and outer rupture resulted in a feeling of isolation, both from others and in the larger context, the universe itself. The rupture was brought about by two fundamental kinds of psychological wounding: neglect or intrusion. Our parents either neglected us by failing to attend to our needs, or they intruded upon us by trying to meet their own needs through us. Most children suffer both types of wounds because in many families, one caregiver tends to be intrusive and the other neglectful. This confusing behavior says to the child, "Now I need you, now I don't." Helen and I see this ruptured connection in childhood as the source of all human problems, and we believe that restoring the awareness of our connection is the source of all healing. We have one diagnosis of unhappy couples: ruptured connection, and we have one goal in therapy: helping them restore awareness of connection with each other. When two people learn how to connect on a very deep level, the pain they experienced in childhood loses its sting. As we discuss in Chapter 1, the unconscious mind has great difficulty distinguishing between past and present. When couples repair the ruptured connection in their present-day relationship, they simultaneously heal the trauma they felt as young children. Their relationship to each other and the universe is restored. This connection can have the power and quality associated with a spiritual experience. The relationship becomes a sacred space. Heal in the present, heal the past, heal the relation to the whole. It has also become very clear to us that safety is the number one precondition for connection. Two people cannot connect if they are defending themselves against a barrage of negativity, or if they live in fear of being abandoned or overwhelmed by their partners. For this reason, all of the exercises in Imago are designed to remove all negativity and to promote safety and mutual respect. Re-romanticizing, the exercise featured later, is the first example. Re-romanticizing encourages couples to act as if they were newly in love with each other, giving each other the same tender attention, gifts, and words of endearment that came effortlessly during romantic love. This play acting is to go on for weeks. Even though many couples begin this exercise with gritted teeth, repetition rewires their neural connections, allowing them to see each other as lovers and friends once again, not enemy combatants. A feeling of safety begins to grow. The behavior change request, another exercise, instills safety by helping couples satisfy their unmet childhood needs, which is the underlying source of much of their anger. In the first step of this exercise, couples examine the chronic frustrations they have with each other and then identify the childhood wish that is embedded in each frustration. I'm frustrated that you don't do a thorough job of cleaning the kitchen. My unmet wish is to have the people who care about me to be more responsible. As a child, I felt there was no one to help me. In the second step, the person asks his or her partner for a specific, doable change in behavior that will help satisfy that underlying wish. Because the two individuals unconsciously perceive each other as surrogate parents, the change in behavior is experienced as if it took place in the past, and it heals the original injury. Because childhood pain was the basis for the frustration between them, soothing the pain diffuses the anger so that it no longer intrudes into the relationship. Removing anger draws couples even closer together. Safety is further enhanced by the holding exercise. At the height of the power struggle, it seems to us that our partners are intentionally withholding love or inflicting pain. We have to strike back or close ourselves off to protect ourselves. But in less than 30 minutes, the holding exercise helps people see beyond their partner's defenses to the underlying pain that caused them. This evocative exercise instructs couples to cradle each other in their arms as they listen to each other's childhood stories. By the end of the exercise, they can begin to see one another as being full of hurt instead of hurtful or bad. As it promotes safety, the holding exercise also makes a major contribution to the healing process. The beauty of this exercise is that it deliberately blurs the boundaries between your partner and your parents. Your partner is holding you tenderly as you talk about not getting enough physical affection as a child. Your partner is listening to you with full attention as you talk about being ignored by your caregivers. Your partner is rocking you and making supportive sounds as you recall being a young child alone in your grief. As you bring to mind the pain from the past, your partner's attentiveness and compassion applies the universal balm. You begin to feel more intimately connected with your partner and less anguished about the past. The Imago Dialogue. Of all the exercises in Imago relationship therapy, we now regard the Imago Dialogue as being the most effective tool for healing a ruptured connection. This technique is described in Chapter 9 and involves 3 separate steps: mirroring, validation, and empathy. Early in our work with the Imago Dialogue, we viewed it as an effective way to deepen communication. Eventually, we discovered that its power goes far beyond communication and can result in profound healing and growth for both partners. Ultimately, it transforms their perceptions of each other, and that transforms the relationship. In addition to the benefits of the Imago Dialogue as outlined in the previous edition of Getting the Love You Want, I'd like to focus here on how and why it is so effective at creating safety and connection. Mirroring, the first step, is designed to help each of you understand what the other is saying. It involves listening to your partner's comments, restating them without altering their meaning, and then asking for confirmation that you got it. Mirroring is elementary in the dual meaning of the word. It is both simple and basic. Mirroring alone is a potent tool for creating an I-thou relationship. To mirror your partner, you have to turn down the volume on your own thoughts so that you can listen attentively. You have to switch the channel from me to you. With this shift in focus, you are telling your partner, in effect, I am no longer the sole person in the universe. I am acknowledging your separate existence. Your thoughts are important to me. Second, the exercise requires you to be an accurate mirror of your partner. You can't be like a funhouse mirror and twist your partner's thoughts, leave out important details, or embellish them with your own. If you commit one of these common errors, your partner is to coach you until you get it right. You got part of it right, but you left out what I said about my feelings. Asking for confirmation is humbling and tedious, but it's the best way to know if you truly understand what your partner is saying. Just as important, asking for confirmation empowers your partner. He or she gets to persist until you interpret the message correctly. Very few of us had this latitude as young children. Whether or not we were understood was dependent on the mood and presence of mind of the adults around us. They could diminish what we had to say, ignore it, counter with their own views, or shame us for even daring to express it. Sadly, many people perpetuate this pattern in their daily conversations with their partners. Mirroring stops this destructive pattern in its tracks. When you mirror each other, You both get to experience what it is like to have someone pay close attention to you, understand exactly what you have to say, and honor your uniqueness. But mirroring goes deeper than that. Unbeknownst to you, your old brain, your unconscious mind, pays close attention as you work your way through this exercise. Having no sense of time and unable to make a clear distinction between individuals, your unconscious mind perceives the attention and respect you are receiving as coming from a caretaker, not just from your present-day intimate partner, and vice versa. As a result, a few repair stitches are made in the ruptured connections you both experienced in childhood. After several years of using this exercise, we discovered that the listening partner can magnify the healing effect of mirroring by asking this question: do you have more to say about that? Or simply, is there more about that? It's a wonderful feeling to have your partner's full attention and to be asked to reveal even more about what you are thinking and feeling. Very few of us had caretakers who expressed much curiosity about our inner world. We were most visible to them when we excelled or when we caused trouble. Our partner's keen interest in our thoughts helps repair those feelings of neglect from long ago. This, in turn, makes us feel much safer in our partner's presence, and we begin to discover parts of ourselves that have been hidden since childhood. We become more whole. The second part of the Imago dialogue, validation, continues the reparation process. Once you have listened to your partner and fully understood what they have to say, you then strive to see how their thoughts make sense to them. You do not have to agree with your partner. You need to see them as they are, not as you wish them to be. Many people spend much of their time trying to get their partners to think the same way they do. This is a common obstacle to restoring connection. But it is important that you affirm the logic of your partner's thinking, to see your partner as an other and no longer an extension of yourself. You are not crazy. From all that I'm learning about you, I can see why you think that way. Many of us had parents who could not transcend their own worldviews. If we didn't agree with them or heed their advice, they ignored us or implied that we were stupid, misguided, rebellious, disrespectful, or crazy. The fact that two quite different points of view could be equally valid, especially opposing views between a parent and child, was beyond their comprehension. Validation establishes the fact that there are two realities. Both are correct. Empathy is the final step in the Imago dialogue. Once you have been reassured that you received your partner's messages exactly as they were intended, you strive to understand the feelings behind them. Now that I really listen to you and understand what you're saying, I'm wondering if you might feel threatened. Or, wow, I think I understand how much your new job means to you. You must be feeling thrilled. The word empathy comes from the German term Einfühlung, which means to feel as one with. When you and your partner are empathic with each other, you are as emotionally close as two people can be. As the poet Rumi said, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right-doing, there is a field. I will meet you there." Love heals all is a well-known sentiment, and it can. It can even heal the deepest emotional wound of all, the ruptured connection between you and your parents. But it needs to be a specific kind of love. It needs to be a mature, patient love that is free of manipulation and distortion, and it needs to take place within the context of an intimate relationship. Receiving empathy from a friend may be very moving, but it does not reach all the way down into your psyche. In order to heal the wounds of the past, You need to receive love from a person whom your unconscious mind has merged with your childhood caregivers. Walking the walk. When Helen and I first contemplated writing a book about love relationships over 20 years ago, we saw it as a text without exercises. We would explain the principles of creating a lasting, intimate bond, but we would not provide any explicit instructions. Today, we are glad that we changed our minds and decided to write a how-to book. We've learned that people can understand all the principles we've just outlined and still have a troubled relationship if they don't do the exercises. Helen's research in the field of epistemology, the science of how we know what we know, helps explain why. There are two different types of knowing: separate knowing and connected knowing. Here's an illustration of the differences between the two. You have a separate or intellectual knowing of an apple if you can recognize a picture of the fruit, understand that it contains the seeds of the plant, or talk about its health benefits. You have a connected or more experiential knowing of an apple when you hold one in your hand, feel the waxy texture of the skin, smell it, and taste it. Separate knowing is abstract. Connected knowing is concrete. Combining these two ways of knowing can give you a more comprehensive level of understanding. You learn about the apple and you taste it. The holding exercise that I described earlier fosters connected knowing. Intellectually, you may accept the fact that creating a safe connection with your partner helps heal the ruptured connection that you had with your parents. It makes sense, especially when you factor in your old brain's tendency to blur the boundaries between people. But when you actually lie in your partner's arms and tell your life story, you begin to react to your partner as if he or she were indeed merged with your caregivers. Then you begin to experience the actual healing process. You feel more loving toward your partner. You feel less anguished about your past. Healing is no longer an intellectual concept. It's a spine-tingling experience. Helen was the first one to realize that she and I had not integrated our intellectual understanding of relationships with our daily behavior. We were great at teaching the concepts of imago relationship therapy, and we could work wonders with other couples, but we were not reaping all its benefits in our own marriage. When we followed our own advice and stopped all criticism of each other, and then began spending more time practicing the imago exercises, especially the imago dialogue, we were able to connect with each other on a much more intimate level. We were talking the talk and walking the walk. The essence of a conscious partnership. If Helen and I were to take all the insights we've gained about love relationships in the past 30 years and reduce them to their essence, we would summarize them in the following 5 sentences. 1. Accept the reality that your partner is not you. 2. Be an advocate for your partner's separate reality and potential. 3. Make your relationship a sacred space by removing all negativity. 4. Always honor your partner's boundaries. 5. Practice the imago dialogue until it becomes second nature and you can interact spontaneously once again. Eventually, you will not have to work on your relationship anymore. The changes will become stable. You will have rewired your brain so that your new way of relating is far more comfortable to you than your old way. You will begin living in a different reality, the reality of sustained connection. You will look for ways to spend more time together, not less. You will begin to experience your differences of opinion as creative tension, as an opportunity to move beyond your isolated points of view. Your desire for sameness will disappear, and you will begin to revel in your partner's otherness. If you happen to slip back into negativity, the pain will be acute. Why on earth did we do that? But the moment typically passes, and you will find it easy to get back on track and restore the sacred nature of your relationship. Your relationship will have become self-sustaining, self-organizing, and self-healing. One reason that this relationship will feel so right to you is that it allows you to participate in one of the fundamental facts about the universe. Much of nature has a dyadic, or two-part structure. According to quantum physics, each particle that comes into being is paired with another particle. Furthermore, each particle is both a point and a wave, depending on how it is viewed, which is why some physicists now refer to particles as wavicles. Sexual reproduction, in the majority of species we know, involves two entities. Noah included one of each on the ark. Our DNA splits into two and then generates the missing half. Our cells divide into two. Anthropologists tell us that in the creation stories in most cultures, people are first introduced as a couple, not as separate individuals. Physiologists tell us that our brains are complementary, right and left brain. Our language is binary, up and down, black and white, etc. Our blood circulates in oscillation between the right and left sides of our body. A recent discovery in astronomy gives us another example of the dyadic nature of the universe, one that is especially appropriate for our view of love relationships. We now know that most stars in the sky are not solitary stars like our sun. Most of them have a companion star. The two stars are attracted to each other by a strong gravitational force, but are kept from collapsing into each other by an opposing centrifugal force. Helen and I like to think of two people in a conscious love relationship as companion stars. Each person is a unique individual, ablaze with potential. One is just as important as the other, and each has a unique and equally valid view of the universe. Yet together, they form a greater whole, kept connected by the pull of mutual love and respect. They mirror the interconnected universe. New Jersey, July 2007. Introduction to the 1988 edition. In today's society, you are encouraged to view marriage as a box. First you choose a mate, then you climb into a box. Once you've had a chance to settle in, you take your first close look at your boxmate. If you like what you see, you stay put. If you don't, you climb out of the box and scout around for another mate. In other words, marriage is viewed as an unchanging state, and whether or not it works depends upon your ability to attract a good partner. The common solution to an unhappy marriage, the one chosen by nearly 50% of all couples, is to divorce and start all over again with a new and, it is hoped, better mate. The problem with this solution is that there is a lot of pain involved in switching boxes. There is the agony of dividing up children and possessions and putting aside treasured dreams. There is the reluctance to risk intimacy again, fearing that the next relationship too might fail. And there is the emotional damage to the other inhabitants of the box, the children, who grow up feeling responsible for the divorce and wonder if they will ever experience lasting love. Unfortunately, the only alternative many people see to divorce is to stay in the box, tighten the lid, and put up with a disappointing relationship for the rest of their lives. They learn to cope with an empty marriage by filling themselves up with food, alcohol, drugs, activities, work, television, and romantic fantasies. Resigned to the belief that their longing for an intimate love will never be realized. In this book, I propose a more hopeful and I believe more accurate view of love relationships. Marriage is not a static state between two unchanging people. Marriage is a psychological and spiritual journey that begins in the ecstasy of attraction, meanders through a rocky stretch of self-discovery, and culminates in the creation of an intimate, joyful, lifelong union. Whether or not you realize the full potential of this vision depends not on your ability to attract the perfect mate, but on your willingness to acquire knowledge about hidden parts of yourself. Personal history. When I began my career as a therapist, I counseled both individuals and couples. My preference was to work with one person at a time. My training was geared toward individuals, and when I saw clients singly, I felt competent and effective. Not so when a couple walked into my office. A marriage relationship introduced a complex set of variables that I was not trained to deal with. I ended up doing what most therapists did: problem-oriented, contractual marriage counseling. When this approach didn't work, I'd split up the couple and assign them to separate groups or counsel them individually. In 1967, my confusion about the psychology of love relationships was compounded when I began to have problems with my own marriage. My wife and I were deeply committed to our relationship and had 2 young children, so we gave our marriage 8 years of intensive examination, working with numerous therapists. Nothing seemed to help, and in 1975, we decided to divorce. As I sat in the divorce court, waiting my turn to see the judge, I felt like a double failure. A failure as a husband and as a therapist. That very afternoon, I was scheduled to teach a course on marriage and the family. And the next day, as usual, I had several couples to counsel. Despite my professional training, I felt just as confused and defeated as the other men and women who were sitting beside me, waiting for their names to be called. In the year following my divorce, I woke up each morning with an acute sense of loss. When I went to bed at night, I stared at the ceiling, trying to find some explanation for our failed marriage. Sure, both my wife and I had our 10 reasons for divorcing, just as everyone else did. I didn't like this about her. She didn't like that about me. We had different interests. We had different goals. But beneath our litany of complaints, I could sense that there was a central disappointment, an underlying cause of our unhappiness that had eluded 8 years of probing. Time passed, and my despair turned into a compelling desire to make sense out of my dilemma. I was not going to walk away from the ruins of my marriage without gaining some insight. I began to focus my efforts exclusively on learning what I could about relationship therapy. As I researched the professional books and journals, I was surprised to find few meaningful discussions of marriage. And the material that I did find was invariably slanted toward the psychology of the individual and the family. There seemed to be no comprehensive theory to explain the intricacies of the male-female relationship. No satisfactory explanation of the powerful emotions that can destroy a marriage. And there was nothing that explained what I found so painfully missing in my first marriage. To fill in the gaps, I worked with hundreds of couples in private practice and thousands more in workshops and seminars. Out of my research and clinical observations, I gradually developed a theory of marital therapy called Imago relationship therapy. My approach was eclectic. I brought together depth psychology, the behavioral sciences, the Western spiritual tradition, and added some elements of transactional analysis, Gestalt psychology, systems theory, and cognitive therapy. In my view, each of these schools of thought made a unique and important contribution to the understanding of the psychology of the individual. But it was only when they were all brought together in a new synthesis that they illuminated the mystery of love relationships. When I began implementing my ideas, my work with couples became immensely rewarding. The divorce rate in my practice sharply declined, and the couples who stayed together reported a much deeper satisfaction in their marriages. As my work became more visible, I began to lecture to both singles and couples. Eventually, I developed an introductory workshop for couples called Staying Together. In 1981, I began a training course for professionals. To date, more than 30,000 people have been exposed to my ideas through counseling, workshops, and seminars. About this book. My purpose in writing this book is twofold: to share with you what I have learned about the psychology of love relationships, and to help you transform your relationship into a lasting source of love and companionship. In short, it's a book about the theory and practice of becoming passionate friends. This book is divided into 3 parts. In Part 1, I chronicle the fate of most relationships: attraction, romantic love, and the power struggle. As I describe the familiar details of married life, I invite you to see them as an emerging psychological drama. I call this drama the unconscious marriage. And by that I mean a marriage that includes all the hidden desires and automatic behaviors that are left over from childhood, and that inexorably lead couples into conflict. In Part 2, I explore a radically different kind of marriage: the conscious marriage. A marriage that helps you satisfy your unmet childhood needs in positive ways. First, I will explain a proven technique for rekindling romantic love. This process restores a spirit of cooperation and gives you the motivation to work on your underlying problems. Next, I will show you how to replace confrontation and criticism, tactics learned in childhood, with a healing process of mutual growth and support. Finally, I will describe how to convert your pent-up frustration into empathy and understanding. Part 3 takes all these ideas and packages them into a unique 10-week course in relationship therapy. Through a series of proven step-by-step exercises that you can do in the privacy of your home, you will not only gain insight into your marital problems, you will be able to resolve them, perhaps without the expense of a marital therapist. This book can help you create a more loving and supportive relationship. And it is within this revitalized marriage that you will find peace and joy. Part 1: The Unconscious Partnership. Chapter 1: The Mystery of Attraction. From Ortega y Gasset. The type of human being we prefer reveals the contours of our heart. When couples come to me for relationship therapy, I usually ask them how they met. Maggie and Victor, a couple in their mid-50s who were contemplating divorce after 29 years of marriage, told me this story. "We met in graduate school," Maggie recalled. "We were renting rooms in a big house with a shared kitchen. I was cooking breakfast when I looked up and saw this man, Victor, walk into the room. I had the strangest reaction. My legs wanted to carry me to him, but my head was telling me to stay away. The feelings were so strong that I felt faint and had to sit down. Once Maggie recovered from shock, she introduced herself to Victor, and the two of them spent half the morning talking. "That was it," said Victor. "We were together every possible moment for the next 2 months, and then we eloped." "If those had been more sexually liberated times," added Maggie, "I'm sure we would have been lovers from that very first week. I've never felt so intensely about anyone in my entire life." Not all first encounters produce seismic shock waves. Raina and Mark, a couple 10 years younger, had a more tepid and prolonged courtship. They met through a mutual friend. Raina asked a friend if she knew any single men, and her friend said she knew an interesting man named Mark, who had recently separated from his wife. She hesitated to introduce him to Raina, however, because she didn't think that they would be a good match. "He's very tall and you're short," the friend explained. "He's Protestant and you're Jewish. He's very quiet and you talk all the time." But Raina said none of that mattered. Besides, she said, how bad could it be for one date? Against her better judgment, the friend invited Raina and Mark to an election night party in 1972. "I liked Mark right away," Raina recalled. "He was interesting in a quiet sort of way. We spent the whole evening talking in the kitchen." Raina laughed and then added, "I suspect that I did most of the talking." Raina was certain that Mark was equally attracted to her, and she expected to hear from him the next day. But 3 weeks went by, and she didn't hear a word. Eventually, she prompted her friend to find out if Mark was interested in her. With the friend's urging, Mark invited Raina to the movies. That was the beginning of their courtship, but it was never a torrid romance. "We dated for a while, then we stopped for a while," said Mark. "Then we started dating again. Finally, 3 years later, we got married." "By the way," added Raina, "Mark and I are still married, and the friend who didn't want to introduce us is now divorced." Those contrasting stories raise some interesting questions. Why do some people fall in love with such intensity, seemingly at first glance? Why do some couples ease into marriage with a level-headed friendship? And why, as in the case of Raina and Mark, do so many couples seem to have opposite personality traits? When we have the answers to these questions, we will also have our first clues to the hidden psychological desires that underlie intimate love relationships. Unraveling the mystery of romantic attraction. In recent years, scientists from various disciplines have labored to deepen our understanding of romantic love, and valuable insights have come from each area of research. Some biologists contend that there is a certain biologic to courtship behavior. According to this broad evolutionary view of love, we instinctively select mates who will enhance the survival of the species. Men are drawn to classically beautiful women, ones with clear skin, bright eyes, shiny hair, good bone structure, red lips, and rosy cheeks, not because of fad or fashion, but because these qualities indicate youth and robust health, signs that a woman is in the peak of her childbearing years. Women select mates for slightly different biological reasons. Because youth and physical health aren't essential to the male reproductive role, women instinctively favor mates with pronounced alpha qualities, the ability to dominate other males and bring home more than their share of the kill. The assumption is that male dominance ensures the survival of the family group more than youth or beauty. Thus, a 50-year-old chairman of the board, the human equivalent of the silver-backed male gorilla, is as attractive to women as a young, handsome, virile, but less successful male. If we can put aside for a moment our indignity at having our attractiveness to the opposite sex reduced to our breeding and food money-gathering potential, there is some validity to this theory. Whether we like it or not, a woman's youth and physical appearance, and a man's power and social status do play a role in mate selection, as a quick scan of the personal messages in the classified ads will attest. Successful 45-year-old SWM with private jet desires attractive, slim 20-year-old SWF, and so on. But even though biological factors play a key role in our amorous advances, there's got to be more to love than this. Let's move on to another field of study, social psychology, and explore what is known as the exchange theory of mate selection. The basic idea of the exchange theory is that we select mates who are more or less our equals. When we are on a search and find mission for a partner, we size each other up as coolly as business executives contemplating a merger, noting each other's physical appeal, financial status, and social rank, as well as various personality traits such as kindness, creativity, and a sense of humor. With computer-like speed, we tally up each other's scores, and if the numbers are roughly equivalent, the trading bell rings and the bidding begins. The exchange theory gives us a more comprehensive view of mate selection than the simple biological model. It's not just youth, beauty, and social rank that interests us, say the social psychologists, but the whole person. For example, the fact that a woman is past her prime, or that a man has a low-status job, can be offset by the fact that he or she is a charming, intelligent, compassionate person. A third idea, the persona theory, adds yet another dimension to the phenomenon of romantic attraction. The persona theory maintains that an important factor in mate selection is the way a potential suitor enhances our self-esteem. Each of us has a mask, a persona, which is the face that we show to other people. The persona theory suggests that we select a mate who will enhance this self-image. The operative question here is, what will it do to my sense of self if I am seen with this person? There appears to be some validity to this theory. We have all experienced some pride and perhaps some embarrassment because of the way we believe our mates are perceived by others. It does indeed matter to us what others think. Although these three theories help explain some aspects of romantic love, we are still left with our original questions. What accounts for the intensity of romantic love, as in the case of Maggie and Victor? Those feelings of ecstasy that can be so overpowering. And why, as in the case of Raina and Mark, do so many couples have complementary traits? In fact, the more deeply we look at the phenomenon of romantic attraction, the more incomplete these theories appear to be. For example, what accounts for the emotional devastation that frequently accompanies the breakup of a relationship? That deadly undertow of feelings that can drown us in anxiety and self-pity. One client said to me as his girlfriend was leaving him, "I can't sleep or eat. My chest feels like it's going to explode. I cry all the time, and I don't know what to do." The theories of attraction we've looked at so far suggest that a more appropriate response to a failed romance would be simply to plunge into another round of mate selection. There is another puzzling aspect of romantic attraction. We seem to have much more discriminating tastes than any of these theories would indicate. To see what I mean, take a moment to reflect on your own dating history. In your lifetime, you have met thousands of people. As a conservative estimate, let's suppose that several hundred of them were physically attractive enough or successful enough to catch your eye. When we narrow this field by applying the social exchange theory, we might come up with 50 or 100 people out of this select group who would have a combined point value equal to or greater than yours. Logically, you should have fallen in love with scores of people. Yet most people have been deeply attracted to only a few individuals. In fact, when I counsel single people, I hear again and again that there just aren't any good men or women out there. The world is littered with their rejects. Furthermore, and this is a curious fact, those few individuals that people are attracted to tend to resemble one another quite closely. Take a moment and think about the personality traits of the people that you have seriously considered as mates. If you were to make a list of their predominant personality traits, you would discover a lot of similarities, including, surprisingly, their negative traits. From my vantage point as a relationship therapist, I see the unmistakable pattern in my clients' choice of relationship partners. One night in a group therapy session, I was listening to a man who was 3 months into his second marriage. When his first marriage broke up, he had vowed to the group that he would never be involved with a woman like his first wife. He thought she was mean, grasping, and selfish. Yet he confessed during the session that the day before he had heard the voice of his ex-wife coming from the lips of his new partner. With a sense of panic, he realized that the two women had nearly identical personalities. It appears that each one of us is compulsively searching for a mate with a very particular set of positive and negative personality traits. Plumbing the depths of the unconscious mind. For this high degree of selectivity to make any sense, we need to understand the role that the unconscious mind plays in mate selection. In the post-Freudian era, most people have become quite adept at rummaging around in the unconscious for explanations of daily events. We talk knowledgeably about Freudian slips, analyze our dreams, and look for ways in which the unconscious might be influencing our daily behavior. Even so, most of us vastly underestimate the scope of the unconscious mind. There is an analogy that might give a better appreciation for its pervasive influence. In the daytime, we can't see the stars. We talk as if they come out at night, even though they are there all the time. We also underestimate the sheer number of stars. We look up at the sky, see a smattering of dim stars, and assume that's all there is. When we travel far away from city lights, we see a sky strewn with stars and are overwhelmed by the brilliance of the heavens. But it is only when we study astronomy that we learn the whole truth. The hundreds of thousands of stars that we see on a clear, moonless night in the country are only a fraction of the stars in the universe. And many of the points of light that we assume to be stars are in fact entire galaxies. So it is with the unconscious mind. The orderly, logical thoughts of our conscious mind are but a thin veil over the unconscious, which is active and functioning at all times. Let's take a brief look at the structure of the brain, that mysterious and complex organ with many different subdivisions. For simplicity's sake, I like to use neuroscientist Paul MacLean's model and divide the brain into 3 concentric layers. The brainstem, which is the inner and most primitive layer, is that part of the brain that oversees reproduction, self-preservation, and vital functions such as the circulation of blood, breathing, sleeping, and the contraction of muscles in response to external stimulation. Located at the base of the skull, this portion of the brain is sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain, because all vertebrates, from reptiles to mammals, share this portion of the anatomy. For the purpose of this discussion, let's think of the brainstem as the source of physical action. Flaring like a wishbone around the top of the brainstem is the portion of the brain called the limbic system, whose function seems to be the generation of vivid emotions. Scientists can surgically stimulate the limbic system of laboratory animals and create spontaneous outbursts of fear and aggression. In this book, I use the term old brain to refer to the portion of the brain that includes both the brain stem and the limbic system. Think of the old brain as being hardwired and determining most of your automatic reactions. The final area of the brain is the cerebral cortex, a large convoluted mass of brain tissue that surrounds the two intersections and is itself divided into 4 regions or lobes. This portion of the brain, which is most highly developed in Homo sapiens, is the site of most of our cognitive functions. I refer to the cerebral cortex as the new brain because it appeared most recently in evolutionary history. Your new brain is the part of you that is conscious, alert, and in contact with your daily surroundings. It's the part of you that makes decisions, thinks, observes, plans, anticipates, responds, organizes information, and creates ideas. The new brain is inherently logical and tries to find a cause for every effect and an effect for every cause. To a degree, it can moderate some of the instinctual reactions of your old brain. By and large, this analytical, probing, questioning part of your mind is the part that you think of as being you. Old brain logic. In sharp contrast to the new brain, you are unaware of most of the functions of your old brain. Trying to comprehend this part of your being is a maddening task because you have to turn your conscious mind around to examine its own underbelly. Scientists who have subjected the old brain to this kind of scrutiny tell us that its main concern is self-preservation. Ever on the alert, the old brain constantly asks the primeval question, is it safe? As it goes about its job of ensuring your safety, your old brain operates in a fundamentally different manner from your new brain. One of the crucial differences is that the old brain appears to have only a hazy awareness of the external world. Unlike the new brain, which relies on direct perception of outside phenomena, the old brain derives its incoming data from the images, symbols, and thoughts produced by the new brain. This reduces its data to very broad categories. For example, while your new brain easily distinguishes John from Susie from Margaret, your old brain summarily lumps these people into 6 basic categories. The only thing your old brain seems to care about is whether a particular person is someone to 1. Nurture, 2. Be nurtured by, 3. Have sex with, 4. Run away from, 5. Submit to, or 6. Attack. Subtleties such as, this is my neighbor, my cousin, my mother, or my wife, slide right on by. The old brain and the new brain, different in so many ways, are constantly exchanging and interpreting information. Here's how this takes place. Let's suppose that you are alone in your house, and all of a sudden, person A walks through the door. Your new brain automatically creates an image of this creature and sends it to your old brain for scrutiny. The old brain receives the image and compares it with other stored images. Instantly, there is a first observation. This humanoid is not a stranger. Apparently, encounters with this creature have been recorded before. A millisecond later, there is a second observation. There are no dangerous episodes associated with this image. Out of all the interactions you have had with this mystery guest, none of them has been life-threatening. Then, rapidly, a third observation. There have been numerous pleasurable episodes associated with this image. In fact, the records seem to suggest that A is someone who is nurturing. Having reached this conclusion, the limbic system sends an all-clear signal to the reptilian brain, and you find yourself walking toward the intruder with open arms. Operating out of your new brain, you say, "Aunt Mary, what a pleasure to see you." All of this has taken place outside your awareness in only a fraction of a second. To your conscious mind, all that has happened is that your beloved Aunt Mary has walked in the door. Meanwhile, as you visit with your aunt, the data gathering process continues. This latest encounter produces more thoughts, emotions, and images, which are sent to the limbic system to be stored in the part of the brain reserved for Aunt Mary. These new data will be part of the information scanned by the old brain the next time she comes to visit. Let's look at a slightly different situation. Let's suppose that the person who walked in the door was not Aunt Mary, but her sister, Aunt Carol. And instead of greeting her with open arms, you found yourself resenting the interruption. Why such a different reaction to these two sisters? Let's pretend that when you were 18 months old, you spent a week with Aunt Carol while your mother was in the hospital having another baby. Your parents, trying to prepare you in advance for this visit, explained to you that Mommy is going bye-bye to the hospital to bring home a little brother or sister. The words hospital, brother, and sister had no meaning to you, but Mommy and bye-bye certainly did. Whenever they mentioned those two words together, you felt anxious and sucked your thumb. Weeks later, when your mother went into labor, you were lifted out of your crib in a sound sleep and transported to Aunt Carol's house. You woke up alone in a strange room, and the person who came to you when you cried was not your mother or father, but Aunt Carol. You dwelled in anxiety for the next few days. Even though Aunt Carol was loving and kind to you, you felt abandoned. This primal fear became associated with your aunt, and for years the sight of her or the smell of her perfume sent you running from the room. In later years, you had many pleasurable or neutral experiences with Aunt Carol. Nonetheless, 30 years later, when she walks into the room, you feel the urge to run away. It is only with great discipline that you rise to greater. No time like the present. This story illustrates an important principle about the old brain. It has no sense of linear time. Today, tomorrow, and yesterday do not exist. Everything that was still is. Understanding this basic fact about the nature of your unconscious may help explain why you sometimes have feelings within your relationship that seem alarmingly out of proportion to the events that triggered them. For example, imagine that you were a 35-year-old woman, a lawyer in a prestigious firm. One day you were sitting in your office, thinking warm, loving thoughts about your husband, and decide to call him. You dial his number, and his secretary informs you that he is out of the office and can't be reached. Suddenly, your loving thoughts vanish, and you feel a surge of anxiety. Where is he? Your rational mind knows that he's probably calling on a client or enjoying a late lunch. But another part of you feels, let's be honest, abandoned. There you are, a sophisticated, capable woman. And just because your husband isn't available, you feel as vulnerable as you did when your mother left you all day with an unfamiliar babysitter. Your old brain is locked in an archaic perspective. Or let's suppose that you were a middle-aged man, a middle manager in a large company. After a hectic day at work, where you managed to placate important clients and put the finishing touches on a multi-million-dollar budget, you drive home, eager to share your successes with your partner. When you walk in the door, you see a note from your partner saying that she will be late coming home from work. You stop dead in your tracks. You had counted on her being there. Do you recover from the disappointment and relish the time to yourself? Do you use the time to do a final check on the budget? Yes. But not before you head straight for the freezer and consume 2 bowlfuls of bland, sweet vanilla ice cream, as close a substitute for mother's milk as you can possibly find. The past and the present live side by side within your mind.